The Republican exodus in Washington may be reaching a tipping point, with 9-term Congressman Darrell Issa of California announcing he's calling it a career today. Issa is the 32nd Republican House member overall to announce retirement, and the second from California this week alone, after Ed Royce, who served 12 terms, announced on Monday that he was bowing out. Both of their seats were seen as particularly vulnerable in the upcoming midterms. Hillary Clinton won both their districts in 2016, and the demographics of those districts have significantly changed, now made up of much larger Latino and Asian populations. So, as Republicans look to the future in Congress, might bipartisanship be the GOP's best hope? We saw the potential seeds yesterday when the two sides met on that very topic.
I feel having the Democrats in with us is absolutely vital, because this should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love.
And today, speaking about that meeting, the president took a victory lap.
My performance, some of them called it a performance. I consider it work. But got great reviews. A lot of those anchors sent us letters saying that was one of the greatest meetings they've ever witnessed.
For the record, I was not one of those anchors. Anyway, could a bipartisan future be a real possibility here? Is it a good idea for either party's future? Joining me to discuss are James Rappaport. Jim is the director at the New Boston Fund and former chair of the Massachusetts GOP. Good to see you, Jim. Thanks, and Gautam, Mukunda, assistant professor at Harvard Business School, research fellow at the Kennedy School, and author of Indispensable When Leaders Really Matter. It's great to see you again, too. Let me start with you. Changing districts, as I described, I would argue more favorable to immigration reform, the Dreamers, etc. Is it fair to say those two guys are gone, Royce and Issa, because of the hyper-partisan nature of their party in the House of Representatives?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily there, but certainly in the country. And they also come from marginal districts. They're also, unlike the Democrats, whose leadership is geriatric at best, they've been there a long time. They're saying it's time to go.
Yeah, but it is in part paying a price. They were at risk because
Royce less so than Issa.
Okay. Do you buy what Trump was saying yesterday? This was this part, no matter who he spoke to, he said, I agree with you. Republican, a Democrat. The conventional wisdom is that was the purpose of yesterday's thing, both to prove that he was competent enough to run a meeting, but also to say this is a bipartisan error. Do you buy it?
I make it a practice to not buy things that Donald Trump says, and if he was trying to prove he was competent to run a meeting, they failed pretty spectacularly, because I think his agreement stems from the fact he doesn't seem to have known what a clean DACA bill is.
But you're not going to get a clean
DACA
DACA.
is the Dreamers bill.
Whether or not you're going to get it, I think he agreed with it because he didn't know what they were asking him for.
But do you think
you're so cynical and you're so anti-Trump. You say stupid things like that all the time. It's unbelievable. He clearly understood it. He was asking. If you actually watched more than 2 minutes, if you watched more of it, you saw
let him finish, and then you're going to go.
He asked good questions.
If there's any evidence that Donald Trump understands any policy issue, it'll be a first from this thing. And it's not cynicism, but realism to admit that. And I'll note, Jim, that you can defend this position all you want, but a guy who's made his political career around demonizing immigrants, who says that I want this bill to be a bill of love, is making a pretty striking thing. But on the issue of bipartisanship, which you asked eventually, Jim, Democrats would be foolish to line up with bipartisanship now. The Republicans, having spent the last few years throwing every norm of bipartisanship into the trash, up to and including stealing a Supreme Court seat, to then reward them by cooperating on their priorities
reward by agreeing with the Republicans to do immigration reform or infrastructure? Isn't their job to serve the country?
Not according to him.
Their job is
asking him, then we'll get to
their job is to serve the country. And unlike Jim, I think that the country is more important than party. And here, the issue that is profound is that Donald Trump is an existential threat to the American institutions. He has demonstrated that over and over again. And the elections are more important in your estimation than policy decisions by Congress this year. I would not have said that if George W. Bush was president, but with Donald Trump as president, it is simply a fact. The Republican Party will enable him in everything, and that means we have to beat them.
I'm not sure either party wants bipartisanship, even though I think the public does. But before you do, I would argue that something Trump yesterday suggests, even though he's criticized for it, that he gets it to a degree. Here's part of what the president had to say.
Maybe you should start bringing back a concept of earmarks. It's going to bring you together. You're going to do it honestly. You're going to get rid of the problems that the other system had, and it did have some problems. But one thing it did is it brought everyone together, and this country has to be brought together.
Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill said this is the swampiest of the swamp. It's a pretty good line, but it is true. That's historically how you buy bipartisan support, is you throw a little pork in every direction of the dissenters. So do you think this bipartisan thing is either real in the mind of the president or is what the GOP needs to not see a takeover by the Democrats come November?
I don't think they do take over for a variety of reasons. The Democrats are going to have to explain why they didn't support tax reform, which is going to be very beneficial to the middle class when they start seeing real money in their pockets. And this money, which the liberals say doesn't matter, $1,000 or $2,000 matters a lot to people making $75,000.
So but you're not answering. You seem bipartisanship is not happy. He doesn't think it's good for the Democrats.
I don't think it's good for the Republicans.
Even care about it?
I don't think it's good for the country.
Why is it bipartisanship is not good for you? Both seem to be saying
and
that.
I'll say why. I think that a competition of ideas and is the best thing to get you the best ideas to work the way through the process.
Do you think the American people are happy, even if, regardless of how they feel about outcomes? And by the way, prior to that withholding diminishing, so their checks get bigger in February or March, whenever it is, they hated this tax bill almost as much as they hated the health care reform that the Republicans were doing. You don't think if you stopped 100 Americans on the street of all different political persuasions, they wouldn't say, I am sick? Isn't that why Charlie Baker's is popular in Massachusetts as he is, because he actually works with Democrats, even if people aren't crazy about everything he does? You don't think they want bipartisanship?
To a certain extent, they do until they don't. And Charlie is popular because he's actually getting stuff done.
Congress is unpopular because all they do is scream at each other.
And you also have the issue where, because of the dynamics of the way the Congress is designed, frankly, the less Congress does, in my opinion, the better off the people are.
So if Donald Trump is listening to the show tonight and he hears you say what you say, then what I would do if I were him, or what he would do, is offer the Democrats the moon and have them say no. And doesn't that put him in exactly the position you don't want him to be? I'll give you the dreamers. All you have to give me is a little fence. You don't have to give me a wall. And by the way, every Democratic member of the Massachusetts delegation that we've talked to on the radio in the last month or two has said they would not say no to voting for some money for a wall or a piece of a wall if it turns out it bought a comprehensive deal.
So making a deal on the dreamers is important if it's doable. I doubt that it is. But if it is, partly for humanitarian reasons. One of my students is a dreamer. On the day that Donald Trump was elected, I was in China with him, and he broke down weeping because he was afraid that he would not be able to return to his home. The Republican Party thinks of cruelty to people like that as a virtue, but I don't. And I really want to help those people, and I really want to help him out. And
let him finish.
And I really want to help him out, and I think that we on a humanitarian level, we owe it to them to do that.
If you disagree with that, and you think he's wrong, why don't they just do it? Why don't they just
several
do it?
reasons.
These are 800,000 people who are as American as your kids, my kids. They are.
First of all, the opportunity to make a deal in DACA has been out there for several years. The Obama did something illegal.
President told Pelosi and Schumer he's going to make a deal and then reneged on it almost overnight.
No, he said he was make a deal, but it also included the wall. And then they said they went in a tizzy and said, oh, no wall. We're going to get money for the wall. We're going to get money we have a right to control our borders, and we owe it to these dreamers to get it done.
Well, can we get back to your original argument here, if I can, where you got into a bit of a spat here. The president knows exactly what, you're condescending or whatever. If the president understood what was going on yesterday, why did he agree with every conflicting position? A clean bill. There's got to be a wall. There's got to be comprehensive.
And took it back on Twitter one day later.
In the same meeting.
Because he's saying he wants a clean bill that includes DACA and the wall. And
one is he walked back everything he said a day later, which does not speak well of his level of understanding. But the basic dynamic here is twofold. One is what Jim is eliding is the fact that the reason we didn't get a deal was because Jeff Sessions in particular, but joined by House Republicans, revolted the idea of allowing any sort of tolerance to immigrants at all, and that was the crucial factor that killed it.
It was not any immigrants. It was saying we have a right to control our borders, which the Democrats don't believe you have a right to do.
Of course we do. Everybody does.
You do not.
And in fact, Obama did more deportations than George W. Bush did.
Sanctuary states, sanctuary cities.
When Jim's friend Steve Miller, gets out from under his sheet and actually tries to engage in these negotiations, as we just saw reporting on this yesterday, even the Republicans say that his positions are so radical they are not helpful. But the central driving dynamic is pretty simple. People will give governmental victories credit to the president, but on immigration, because a large part of his base is so radical, if he cuts a deal that allows the Dreamers to stay in the country, a big chunk of his base will flip out.
You get less 15 seconds.
First of all, they won't. And the fact is that people believe that these Dreamers have a right to be here under certain conditions, especially if they have not committed a crime and they are contributing members of society.
If the matter was on the House floor today, wouldn't it pass overwhelmingly?
Yes.
Nice to see you, Jim Rappaport. Gautam, good to see you.
Always.
Bipartisanship, just like in Congress. Nice to see you, gentlemen, both. Appreciate it.